Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. And thank you so much for joining us as part of the Together conference. We are here today on behalf of the Center for Social Innovation. I am Palak Kohli, the Communications, Client Engagement, and Impact Coordinator at CSI, and joined here today by the very amazing Randy Terada, who is the Senior Program Manager at CSI. Also, I would like to take this moment to acknowledge that I am located in the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. And now it is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also wholeheartedly want to welcome all of you here today and pay respect to the ancestors past and present, the people in our lives, the land we're on, that births life itself. And really want to thank everyone and everything that made this moment possible today. Thanks again for joining us. So yeah, I think we really want to be very intentional today and really want to open this conversation that you or your organizations making, the impact, and what would the impact you would like to make in this world. So yeah, I think that's probably the essential why behind you running an organization or wanting to be in this space. But yeah, we believe that however big or small, it does not matter. Impact is impact, and that's why you're here for. And we really want to be the ones starting that conversation. Another thing that we've really kind of, we center our work on is that communities make impact and not documents. So really, we want to start where you're at, where you're headed, what is your planned impact, what are the challenges you're facing, and do you really feel kind of in control about the impact that you're talking? Is it really your voice, or are you feeling like you're speaking a foreign language? So these are a few questions we want to address as we progress with the session today. So a little bit of what we do and where we come from. So we're a part of the Adopting Common Measures team at the Center for Social Innovation. It is essentially a national 3-year project, which is funded in part by the Employment and Social Development Canada, which is essentially the Government of Canada's SDG unit. And our focus is, to support social purpose organizations to connect with the Sustainable Development Goals and track their social impact. So this project is essentially led by Center for Social Innovation in partnership with SEDNet and the Common Approach to Impact Measurement. Yeah, so our prerogative really is to promote the awareness of SDGs and really support social purpose organizations in their journey to align their work with Canada's 2030 agenda and really to support them to track their impact. Currently, we're focused on helping SPOs tracking their impact around SDGs 2, 3, and 8. And I will also try to break down why we call it Adopting Common Measures as our project. So adopting really means that we want this to be adopted by social purpose organizations nationwide across Canada. Common means that, the measures that emerge from ground up instead of, top down. And, essentially, they should not really be imposed by funders or higher up of government, really essentially helping you all as organizations get a voice. So yeah, basically emerging from the spot that you're standing on. And the last part, measures, means that we would, really support your journey as to how would you like to measure your impact? What indicators do you think are the most relevant for your work in use? So we really don't want to just support SPOs to track their impact. We also want to document it and profile organizations that are doing such amazing work. So really want to help communicate your impact story across Canada and also back to the UN. A little bit of why should you do this? Why should you really be talking about impact or tracking your impact? It really helps like attracting funders, customers, also help to boost your profile, demonstrate a little bit of accountability, encourage your staff, volunteers, supporters, and really helping in making those smart, impactful, informed decisions.
Okay, so thank you everybody for attending. We're going to speak a bit about impact, and speaking about impact in these current economic, political, and in the social climate we're in. It means that we're living in times where if you're not rethinking, revising, reinventing everything you do, then you may be a step behind. So let's turn the page together, sort of, and let's look at some ideas that will help your organization begin an impact tracking journey. So social purpose organizations, they are in the business of change, and change means the difference between time 1 and time 2. So question being, what is the change that you want to make? Simple. So here's the absolute crux of what I want to talk to you about today. So, if you put yourself in the position of a startup or your nonprofit organization, or where you are in the academia, you're working at a social enterprise perhaps, the first things people ask is, what do you do? That's an easy conversation. We can talk about processes, because that's what we're really in charge of, like holding meetings, creating a young leaders sort of panel, organizing a community meeting, sort of holding a resume workshop or resume clinic for, let's say, laid off older adult workers. All of this stuff, the activities that we do, that's easy peasy. That's easy to talk about. What's harder to explain, though, is the so what. Someone says, okay, so what? So what, you held 2 webinars on the climate crisis? So what? You created a young leaders panel. 14 older adults now have newly minted resumes. So what? These are the outputs. These are the activities you did. Good on you. But what are the outcomes? What difference did you make? What's your impact? What we're sort of looking at now is, so what? That, we conducted 6 workshops on food and safety, and 35 people came. Next slide. So what that we develop, and distribute parenting newsletters. 300 parents. Does it make a difference in parenting practice? So what that we provide sort of in-home nutrition, education to low-income caregivers, 6-week series, and leadership development, 30 hours strategic planning assistance to local government board. Now, this may sound harsh, doesn't it? Don't get me wrong. You can't make change or experience success without doing these activities, right? The so what here isn't about diminishing the great activities organizations are doing, okay? It's just asking the further question, though, to what end? What changed as a result of these outputs? What changed as a result of doing these tremendous activities? Next slide, please. The key word here is difference. For all the time and effort spent on outputs and activities in T1, what happened in T2? Next slide, please. Let's take a quick look at this chart. Okay. Let's compare the difference when speaking about outputs on the left and the outcomes on the right side. So here we have top left corner. So we have an emergency shelter providing 23 people with beds. So what? It's in answering the so what that you really dig into the outcomes as opposed to the outputs. So the outcome of this is that residents of this emergency shelter will obtain, stable housing and full-time employment. So from the left-hand column, we have stated activities or outputs, right? Our group will provide social, teens, group work for teens after school, etc. All the outputs on the left-hand side. But after we ask the so what, we're forced to double down and think, okay, we're providing these great activities and outputs, but what are we aiming for in these activities, right? What is the ideal end result? So far, we've been talking about your organization's activities or outputs, the processes you can control, and you can talk about, even boast about, right? Which is entirely within reason, of course. Why not boast about the number of shelter beds that you've made available? Why not boast about the interview skills workshops, etc.? But increasingly, investors, funders, community foundations, government organizations, they're wanting to dig a little deeper into outcomes and the change that you hope to achieve. So next slide, please. So a logic model, I think, is a key first step, sort of, that allows you the opportunity sort of to break down your organization, your model, your programming model, into structured pieces. So it'll give you an idea of what are the physical activities you need to do in order to achieve the outcomes and the impact you set out to make. So here you can start at resources, and then you can move, sequentially through the document. Or you can start out at the other end, at the systemic long-term impact that you want to make, and then you can work backwards from there to the outcomes, outputs, and activities. So let's look at a very simple logic model. Okay, so this is a logic model that simply reflects, the component parts of a baking sheet of chocolate chip cookies. Okay, we have resources or inputs in the first column, and that's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, this is the stuff you need in order to get started. Next is activities. In order to bake the cookies, you have to, you have to do activities. Next is the outputs. Now, these are the cookies, but not so fast here. There were other outputs just as important. We have, presentation is everything. So we have present cookies on a plate. So this output is a way of improving the way you show your product. Now, I just want to use this example of cookies, or cookies on a plate. And you can think of, for example, think of the output of resumes, but also an output could be a series of resume workshops. So then we have outcomes here, and the results we expect in the short, medium, and long term. Now, note here in the outcomes, the dirty kitchen. Now, especially for those of us aligned with the SDGs, you need to take into consideration the possible negative outcomes as well, as the positive outcomes. And then the last column, you have the impact, which is really measured over the longer term. So what I want to bring to your attention to is the column between outputs and outcomes. You can see I kind of put a line down there. So that separation between outputs and outcomes. This was our so what column in previous slides. It forced us to move from outputs to think about what the outputs lead to and what are the resulting outcomes. So here's the question. How do we know we've met our outcomes? How do we know the workers ate the cookies, let alone liked the cookies? What proof do we have? In other words, what indicators do we use to show we have accomplished our outcomes? We need indicators to show this. So here's a more advanced logic model. The situation is that here, students, they're bringing unhealthy lunches to school. They're kind of high in sugar, high in fat. So this program is sort of aiming So it's aiming at, in the long term, to prevent health problems in adulthood. So these inputs here, as you can see, are straightforward, including everything from funding, research, staff and equipment, supplies, everything. Now note the activities: menu planning, information sessions, nutrition, education and food buying, workshops, recipe demonstrations, and food sampling. Then we have the audience, and then note the outputs. Note them, they're all quantitative measures. Number of menu planners distributed, number of information sessions held, number of workshop sessions, number of recipe demonstrations. That's pretty straightforward again, right? So, and then we have outcomes here. They're broken up into short, medium, and long term. Sometimes I see outcomes broken just down into short and long term here. But here we see as the outcomes, increased awareness of healthier food options and healthier food in student lunch boxes, you know, in the short term. Long term, they want to really establish good eating habits amongst the school age children that they can then, you know, bring into adulthood. But I need to point out here that the most frequent mistake I see when people construct their logic models is confusing the activities with the outcomes. Okay, so under activities, I will put something like increase awareness of healthier food options, okay, which is an outcome. That's an outcome, and if you put that as an activity, you may end up doing, you know, too many things, or maybe not enough things, or doing all the wrong activities, because you really haven't opened up. You haven't created a space there to logically articulate the relationship to what your physical activities are and what the relationship is, those activities, to your outcomes. So really, the outcomes are the so what answer to the outputs. And basically what indicators do is help you prove that your outcomes are the result of your outputs and activities. My last slide here, and what we're looking at is the SDG for number 8, the Sustainable Development Goal number 8 for decent work and economic growth. You can see that on the left column, promoting, you know, sustainable economic growth and productive, meaningful employment for everyone. Now, if you look at the next column, this is where the Canadian national indicators for this SDG. The indicators measure unemployment rate, proportion of youth not in, you know, education, employment, or training, etc. Now, these are national indicators all meant to track and measure the SDG number 8 on a national scale. Okay. Now, however, for many of you in the audience today, you're all running local SDG operations. So your indicators are not going to necessarily cover such a broad canvas, okay? Nor should they. So for example, look at the third column. Here is a program, okay? Program to increase financial independence of individuals. So here's a program aligned with SDG number 8. And their indicators reflect their local community programming. So the work is aligned with SDG decent work, but reflects a local variation. And the indicators show this. And as you can see, the indicators can be both quantitative and qualitative. And now take the fourth column, the East Town Community House. Again, they're working to deliver decent work practices, but this time deliver them internally to their own staff. They want to deliver decent work to their own staff. And we see here their indicators. Plus, you have good indicators, and if you can track them and collect the data, then you can truly communicate great impact. And this is to show how good indicators can lead to a really strong impact statement. Between outputs and outcomes are the indicators. And indicators then reflect the change that you want to make. So I hope in this really short presentation, I gave you sort of an idea of how you could track your impact using indicators. But a necessary prerequisite of that is you've got to really be able to describe the change you want to make, and then track that or visually represent that, I would believe, in a good logic model sequencing. And that is really all I have to do and say. And I'm going to turn it back over to you, Palak.
Yeah, thank you so much, Randy. And thanks to all of you for being so patient and kind of tune in. Yeah, just to summarize, a lot of our work is rooted in what we call the common foundations for impact tracking. So what Randy also described today was the logic model, which is step one in impact tracking. And the step one is planning your intended change. And it's basically a 5-step process. Once you have planned your intended change, say by working on a logic model, then step 2 is to use performance measures and indicators, and that is what he I think also left you here with that food of thought. And the third step is how to collect the useful information. Step 4 is gauging performance and impact, and step 5 is reporting on your results and sharing them with stakeholders. We are really doing a few of these offerings and things as part of adopting common measures. So we have one-on-one sessions where we could really support your impact tracking journey. We also have bite-sized webinars like the one we had today. And if you're a part of a network or any such organization that also connects other social purpose organizations or mission-driven organizations, we'd be happy to host such sessions for you as well. And we also have this community of practice, which is a little more immersive. It's like 8 sessions where we, help you and support your impact tracking journey. And lastly, we would love to profile your organization because, we know a lot of you are doing some great work, and we would really like to kind of support that and amplify your story to Government of Canada and report back victories. So we have one, Randy, which says, how is impact operationalized? Like, what is happy impact?
What are the indicators for happiness? Actually, there's a lot of well-being indicators, community well-being indicators. I think there's even a national well-being index that the University of Waterloo, I believe, started. So there's what I'm saying, there's indicators, which you can use to chart and indicate and sort of refine your work towards measuring contentment, or measuring a level of physical and mental health using these well-being indexes. There's global mental health, physical health well-being indexes, and there's national ones as well. And I'm sure if you Google that, you'll get a number of these indexes that you can use sort of to chart your progress in your programming. And also you could also take from them, use some of the standard indicators that they use, and you can throw them right into your project. So I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Oh, was that University of Alberta? There was, I think they were in Alberta,
Canadian.
but the Canadian Wellbeing Index. Yeah, that was a project of a university. And I know we have a lot of academics here in the audience. I think in Alberta or Ontario, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think Eve mentioned the Happiness Alliance.
Happiness Index, yes.
Wow, we have quite a few questions trickling in. So another one is, what do you see as the most important role of the SDGs in impact measurement?
I was to reverse. I would like to emphasize the important role of impact measurement in the SDGs. Sorry, but I mean, the important. I think it goes without saying the important role of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all 17. It's a global program. It's really locally community based, and the Canadian government has a national agenda 2030 with Canadian indicator framework there. So the importance there is that, and I'm sure we all share the importance of working with organizations to align with one or more of the 17 SDGs, and hopefully then with the common foundations of the common approach. This is the other partner that we're working with. They have 5 essential practices that I think Palak outlined towards tracking your impact, tracking your SDG impact in your program. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. We have another question, which says that at the college I work, our main form of measuring impact for our sustainability programming is through surveying participants. What are some other tools or approaches to collect information needed in measuring impacts? Delhi, I can kind of start us off by saying, depending on if you're looking at quantitative data or qualitative data, a few other ways of doing measuring impact is, conducting focus groups or conducting interviews, and these stories or testimonials, because those are a few which really kind of capture the intent. And of course, I don't know the scope of your project, but those definitely could be. And even as part of surveys, sometimes, having like time-based surveys, like a before and after, pre and post, those definitely could be of use. Randy, if you would want to add.
No, I can't really add anything more to that. That was a great answer.
There's another question by Lisa. Could you give a couple of examples of instruments to use to measure both quantitative and qualitative indicators in the examples you gave at the local level? So examples of instruments.
Palak, why don't you start us off on some of the instruments you've used in your startup? For us, we've used a lot. There was the survey method. We've also conducted, what we did was we actually sent out self-addressed, this is pre-COVID, self-addressed stamped surveys to our shelter participants, and just with some really straightforward 5-question survey, and it was self-addressed stamp envelopes, so they could throw it back into the mailbox. And we got a really good feedback on that. And we did this over the 3-year project, so we could do a longitudinal study of the impact that we were making. So I just cite that because that was probably an interesting one, and one that worked really quite well. Of course, there's if you want to measure, on the quantitative side, that is where it gets into, you have to adjust your survey methods to capturing quantitative data. And so that through basically the design of your survey and the way that you design the survey questions and the data that you can collect could count as the quantitative data. Just number of attendees that cited this, number of attendees that, the percentage of attendees in this group, and you can cross-reference the answers to your questions. So those, I believe our method of collecting quantitative data was through citing surveys, pre and post surveys, sometimes with many of our programs that were testing on knowledge. So we would, there would be a quick pre-program survey and a post-program survey. And we would collect data from from both of those surveys. Palak, why don't you go ahead? And does anybody else have their hand up?
I think we do have a few more questions coming in, but yeah, I think what a little bit of my work at my startup initially was, understanding again the well-being and how confident young professionals were feeling. So, a little bit we did, a lot of these interviews with them around like more on the qualitative side to understand if there was a change in their behavior, and so it was a little more that centric, but yeah, definitely all in for what you mentioned, Randy. There's another question: are there best practices in terms of data protection in impact measurement?
I do not know the answer to that question.
Yeah, from
we
what
could
I
follow
understand,
up. We can
yeah,
follow
we
up
could
with that.
follow up. And even the common approach to impact measurement, they kind of help with data standardization and protection. And also there are a few tools out there and softwares that help you track your impact. So even at the Center of Social Innovation, we're in the works of developing something, and there are others out there, and we could also follow up sending them to you, like Symmetrica and other such impact measurement softwares, and those actually kind of are embedded with data protection measures. But yeah, we could also email you a few of the resources. As I think we're about to hit time, so I will also share our contact details, and happy to keep this conversation going.
So please feel free to reach out and connect with
Yes.
us. We'd love to continue this conversation. Our bite-sized webinars, we're planning to have very intimate and productive conversations of no more than 3-4 organizations tops, so that we could have a real good conversation around SDG impact tracking. So please get in contact with us and we'll set those up, because that's what we're here to do.
Yes.